Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on MiamiGhostChronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind-the-scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, it's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing today? Good, I hope. Like I was saying in my last show here in South Florida, we're in the rainy season. That equates to one thing and one thing only: hot and humid. Hot and humid. Yes, so this is why you see me with this shirt on, but underneath I've got a tank top. So when the show is over, I gotta hang out in a tank top because, yes, despite having air conditioning, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm a native South Floridian, so you know how that goes, guys. But anyway, today, excited is not the word. Super excited. Yay, 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 yay. I have a guest that I am beyond thrilled to have on the show and to speak to him. And who I have is Bill Bean. And I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who know Bill Bean, who he is. First of all, for those of you who don't, he's a world-renowned spiritual warfare and deliverance minister and exorcist, and he's also better known as the spiritual warrior. He's an internationally known author, lecturer, and paranormal/supernatural expert. He's been featured on TLC's A Haunting series, as well as the Lifetime Movie Network series I Was Possessed. He's written several books. And one of the things that me and Bill were talking right before we started recording was, and he's going to explain briefly about it, that he's had these experiences which were, as a child, that most people would think, if I ever had that experience, I would never ever have anything to do with evil, the supernatural, anything like that. It's like, forget it. And not only is he involved in it, he takes it on head on. But anyway, let me get him on. How are you doing today, Bill?
I'm doing great, Marlene. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a long time coming.
Yes, we kept missing each other, but not because,
Yeah.
it's understandable. People don't realize, and what we were talking about, that part of your ministry is that you travel to work with people, I guess, that find themselves in situations that I imagine you already know from your own personal experience, and also that other families that you dealt with. What are the earmarks of when they have something that's crept into their lives, which is...
Yeah. I mean, it's, there's so many people in need, first of all, and there's times, Marlene, that, oftentimes I don't get to bed before 4 a.m., sometimes 5 a.m., and I'm constantly answering messages from people, and people contact me from all over the world, so I travel all over America every week, and here lately it's been 2 trips at some points, along the way here, and that, boy, I'll tell you, that is a miracle in itself from God, that He helps to rejuvenate me. Making 2 trips in 1 week is not an easy thing to do when you're flying long distances. But anyway, it is a blessing, and I praise God for it. And I couldn't be where I'm at right now had I not been there. And, for so many years I was a victim, and I was tortured, really tormented and tortured for many, many years, as was my family. My family was destroyed by demonic forces, and I nearly was as well. And my first book is called Dark Force, and it chronicles the events that took place there. And in the book Dark Force, I said that it began in 1970, but it really goes much further back. I found out after I'd written the book that some family members many, many, many years ago had actually done some things to conjure up those evil forces, and they came in. And believe me, if you have intent to invite the devil in, he's going to come and he's going to kick the door in, and a bunch of demons are going to come with him. And so that's what happened. And I mean, so that's the origins. And I didn't realize it again until this family member had told me that after I'd written the book. And then I went back and through some old family photographs that just mind-boggling. I mean, I never knew they existed. My mother had held on to them for many, many years, and then after she tragically died of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 44, my sister had gotten those photographs, and my wife and I were over her house one Christmas. I don't know, I think it was maybe 2005 or something like that, and she asked, did I want some of those photos, and I said yes, and took some home and started going through them, and I found some very disturbing things in some of the photographs. And obviously my mother knew what was in the photos because she held on to them for all of those years. But the first known photograph of something supernatural taking place involving me was taken in 1968 at age 2.
Wow.
And my sister was 11 at the time, and it was Christmas time, 68, and she was seated to my left, and to her far left was this very tall, black hooded thing. And I mean, you could see it very, very clearly in the picture.
Wow.
And so that is 1968, and then the following year at 69, at the age of 3, a Polaroid photograph was taken of me. It's supposed to be just me at age 3. And in the background, it was as if a dimensional doorway had opened up because these humanoid-looking beings were lined up behind me in single file, different heights. The face of what looked to be like a lion was above my head. There was a little gray alien-looking thing standing to my left, and to the left of the gray alien-looking thing was what appeared to be something that would look like a Bigfoot creature, and just all kind of different faces. Again, it was as if some sort of dimensional doorway was open at that precise moment, and all of those entities were there.
I'm not kidding you. I'm getting goosebumps as you're describing that. That is incredible.
Yeah.
And this was before you actually moved into the house that was
exactly.
Okay, so and my point being that sometimes people think that it's just because you unfortunately moved to the wrong house, but what do you think? What was it? Was there something in that house once you moved there that amplified it, or?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely, Marlene. I think that. So again, we had, what we had on the family due to the invocation of those individuals. So that was already present and manifest. However, I feel that my parents may have actually been guided to that house by these evil forces, because just as God guides us in certain things to where, God wants us in a situation for the good, the devil mimics everything that God does. And so he's the original copycat, and so he tries to put us in positions of disaster and failure. So I think that really demonic forces actually guided them to that house where evil was already present and manifest. So the whole area, and I'm quite certain to this very day, the area still has this type of evil upon it. I have been back several times over the years as a spiritual warrior deliverance minister on the behalf of other families in that very area who needed my help. And so a lot of people were affected, just not my family and I. I found out, again, after writing the book and doing all these TV shows and everything, many people from the area had contacted me saying, that they too had suffered, and they too had many bizarre, unexplained, paranormal, supernatural experiences, when they lived in the area. So, interestingly enough, there is a structure located now. The house sat at the bottom of a downhill cul-de-sac.
Okay.
And there was a very large and deep ravine behind the house.
Okay.
And that stretched for several miles. And 2 miles south from where the house sat is a gigantic boulder-like structure in the middle of the woods. Just looks like it was placed there. It doesn't match up with anything else. And it's called the Wishing Rock. And according to research that a friend of mine, John D. Romine, did, he had actually written a book about it. And through his research, he said that Native American tribes used to gather there and worship. And also saying that they would have these, I guess, some sort of supernatural experiences there. So perhaps
Right.
the Wishing Rock is a gateway or a vortex
Right, that's what I
for
was
these
thinking.
entities to come through. Yeah, and it has greatly affected the area. But furthermore, there was one area in particular in that ravine that appeared to certainly have the look of an Indian burial ground, and it was rumored that it was that. And it just stood out from every other thing. It was just a very eerie spot and place, that's for sure.
And Bill, and I know what you're saying, but it makes you wonder because, of course, as humans, we think of time in the linear aspect. Have you ever wondered if also they were trying, like in other words, they kind of knew what your potential was as far as spiritual warfare, and they were trying to head you off at the pass and kind of
Yeah,
derail you from
you're exactly
fulfilling
right.
that?
That's exactly what it was. And so I've said this many times that, despite the level of torment and trauma and suffering that took place, I do believe that God allowed some of those things to happen in order for me to see if I could be who I am right now, to be that spiritual warrior for Him. So yes, there's no question about it that those things had to happen. And when we think about this also, and if we read in the book of Job, that the devil in that book, and I still believe that he is, subservient to God in the sense that he checked in with him. There he says, he comes in and God says to him, "Where have you been?" He says, "I've been roaming the earth to and fro, just roaming up and down the dry places." And so that shows us that he is still subservient to God, and the reason that God doesn't totally destroy him is because he serves a purpose, and the purpose is because we have free will.
Exactly.
Therefore, there must be an adversary to man in order to have this type of free will.
Right, exactly. And that's I guess where I was going with this. You have free will. You could have just as easily what we talked about earlier, because of these childhood experiences, you would have said, forget it. I never want to think about that. I never want to have to deal anything with demons, devils, Satan. Forget it. I'm done with that. You could have gone that. You could
Well,
have. You made that choice.
I
Uh,
certainly was thinking it. I was thinking it, believe me, Marlene, and I was sort of like the Jonah swallowed up by the whale in the sense that God put it so strongly on my spirit that I couldn't tune him out anymore. I tried to ignore it. I just was I'm a very stubborn individual, and it takes the wall to fall on me for me to move on something or to go along with something. And at that time, I just had my mind made up that there was no way that I was. First of all, I didn't feel worthy. I thought God must be mistaken. How in the world? Why would He call somebody like me? Because I had
that's right.
through all that pain and torment and suffering, with my mother dying so young, I had to quit school in the 8th grade, and I lied about my age.
I was
And I
about
went
to
to
ask you,
work.
how old
So
were you, Bill, when your mom passed?
yeah, it was just about ready. I think I was just about ready to turn 15, and I
That's
lied
such a
about my age.
that is such a crucial age. My God,
Yeah,
that's
and I went to work for a construction company, and believe you me, I was a skinny, malnourished kid, and we had it rough. And I was suddenly, working with men,
right.
seriously tough guys, and that made me a tough guy having to be in that type of environment. And it was brutal because
Yeah.
again, and being a skinny young kid, I was carrying around 90-pound buckets of mud, one in each hand, and then having to hump this heavy drywall, 5/8 sheets of drywall, and things of that nature. So
Yes.
it wasn't fun back then, but again, looking back on it, I'm grateful for it because it really did shape me, because I feel that we all must be strong in mind, body, and spirit. So again, it was part of the process in order for me to be who I am and to be where I am right now.
Exactly.
So I'm grateful to God for it.
Right. It makes you. And what? Let's say you moved on. At what point did you realize that what your purpose was to confront evil, to do battle with it?
Yeah, after the very first time, when I finally, and what happened was, again, it held me back for many years because I thought that I was intellectually inadequate, so therefore I could never be anything of substance or positive. I could never make a positive difference in anyone's life because of the hand that I was dealt. And I, furthermore had a mindset that I thought that, I'll go cause some miseries for others since I'm so miserable, and that's a horrible way to be. And I was just so empty and sad that I was seeking death. I really was. I lived my life on the edge for a long, long time.
Right.
And then one day I had an epiphany that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I knew that it could do
That's right.
better. It could be better. And so that was it, to where I started to study, and I spent years in serious biblical studies and studied ancient history, ancient religion, you name it. I mean, I studied it because God says my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And so my mind to this day is still a sponge. I try to study everything that I can. Knowledge is power. And so the more that I studied, the more confidence I had and the more empowered that I became. And in the beginning, people would I've been contacted from all over the world by people. And, when I'm home, when I'm not traveling, I do international Skype and phone sessions with people. I've helped people in 40 different countries by the power of God working through me. But I finally felt that I was ready to answer that call from God. And after the first time, the first family that I went and helped, I knew right then and there that this was my purpose in life, and I never looked back. I knew that, this is what I was supposed to be doing. And it hasn't been, a smooth journey, that's for sure. I mean, I've been in some life-threatening situations over the years.
And that's why I asked you, because I was thinking, did he go into a case or into, let's say, intervention with a family knowing, or was he kind of ambushed, like, I'm helping this family, I'm just thinking maybe they're going through some type of crisis, family stuff, and then it turns out like, guess what? I wonder if, and that's why I was wondering if that happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, then you've got regular, actual physical confrontation then. And I'm thankful that God blessed me with the abilities and the skills to be able to defend myself very well. But that said, I have skills and abilities to also be able to contain people without having to injure them. And that's, where that comes into where even though someone is actually trying to attack me, and I've been, there many times in situations, I have these tactics that I can use to not have to hurt them, but to be able to contain them, to keep them from hurting me. And, I've had people, you name it. I mean, my goodness, we'd be here all night if I would list some of the things and situations that I've been in. But trust me when I tell you that I have been in situations that some people would absolutely run from.
I believe it. And I've spoken about on some of my other shows, Bill, and I wanted to get your insight on it. I tell somebody, because nowadays everybody, like, there's everything, all these paranormal shows, everything's the demon, and everybody thinks it's. I tell myself, you really don't understand, or they see the Hollywood version where, something happens and then 72 hours later, you've got flying furniture, and I tell sometimes, first of all, that's not the last thing you want, but to me, the aim of evil is to corrupt a human being, and sometimes it's done in slow measures, because that's how you truly deeply corrupt a human being.
Very subtle, very covert. That's exactly right.
Stuff starts flying around your house. One or two things, you're going to run out and move, or it's like, call the priest quick, or call somebody. In other words, it doesn't want to let on that it's there, kind of trying to have your life unravel until it's too late. In other words. And and when a person gets to that point, they're just so beaten down mentally, spiritually, and physically that they lose the will to fight, and that's a dangerous place to be, because that's how demonic possession can take place, is when a person is worn down to the point where they just give up. And which is, I was going to ask you, with these families that you've gone and seen, or these cases, and I'm sure at some point you start talking to them about, what led up to this. Do you have circumstances like that where something has been going on sometimes for years?
Yes, and some of these cases, and I'd say probably a good portion of these cases, have one common thread, and that is child molestation.
Yes.
And it's so so awful. It's so sad. It's so despicable.
Yes.
It is, in my opinion, the most wicked and heinous act that could take place.
Yes.
And so not only when the perpetrator, who was obviously demon-filled and guided to carry out such a wicked and heinous act,
Yes.
not only, is he demon-filled, but when this act takes place, then these demons come on to the victim, and they stay with the victim. And the reason for that is when people are exposed to high levels of trauma,
Yes.
the pineal gland and the adrenal glands, these excretions come out. And I don't know if you've heard of this. I'm sure you have. That this is the most powerful drug on the black market. It's called adrenochrome. And so demons are drawn to this like candy, and this is why they will stay, with the victim when this takes place. And it is just so sad, so tragic, and I have dealt with people who carried this around with them for many years, and you would look into their eyes, and I would just look and say, wow, there's no life in that person's eyes. They just, they're really at the edge.
Yeah.
But then, in instances where God has worked through me to deliver the person from all of that, it's the greatest feeling in the world to see life come back into that person's eyes. And then it's even greater to hear about and know that they are moving forward to where they're actually free and they can move forward and have a quality of life. And, I tell people all the time, yesterday is dead. Yesterday is gone. Yesterday is not coming back. So we have to focus on today, tomorrow, the next day, because life is all about moving forward. And when a person is under that kind of oppression, they might as well be in shackles and chains because they cannot move forward. They are just totally stuck. And that's, and we also, we as human beings, we operate on frequency and vibration. So if our frequency and vibration is high, then that means life is good, and we're in the positive, and we are moving forward, and praise God. But if a person is on that low frequency and low vibration, then life is a challenge, to say the least, and nothing ever goes right. There's always a situation and a drama and never an answer. And I've been there, and it's a horrible way to live. And so I'm every bit as much a counselor, per se, as I am a spiritual warrior, because I have to sit down with these people first. The first thing I do is when I arrive, I bless the property, and then I'll go in and anoint everybody's heads with a holy mixture, and then I'll say several prayers, including a house blessing prayer, right at the front door, and then we sit down and we have to talk. And sometimes those talks can range from 2 hours up to 7 hours. I've sat there with some people for over 7 straight hours, and just unbelievable. I mean, you wouldn't believe it if I told you some of the things that, some of these poor victims have been involved in and have had done to them, just horrific beyond imagination. And again, I thank God and praise God for having me to be in the position as an agent for him, that he can work through me to actually help these people.
And let me ask something, Bill. And like you said, like that childhood, and I understand that very well as far as whether it's a one-time or systematic abuse. Do you find, especially when you're talking already to an adult, like you said, sometimes they repeat that pattern of abuse with other relationships they have later on in life, almost like compounding it, like
You're absolutely right, and it does go that way sometimes. And so we as human beings, we're creatures of habit, so we will stay in situations that, we know are not good and right, but yet we'll stay in it because it's a familiar place.
Right.
And so a lot of people do that knowing full well that it's not good for them, and they're just afraid to take that leap of faith. They're afraid to take that gigantic, and that's another thing I preach to people is that, if we're in total faith, and we're really in that, what I call warrior mode, which is faith, strength, and courage. If we're truly walking in that, then we must move forward into the uncharted territory, into the unseen, because that is true faith, and God will be there, and God will lead us to and through whatever it may be, and great favor and blessing will come as a result of that.
And And you make a very good point. Some people, despite being or living under horrific circumstances, whatever they might be, or their families at this point, sometimes this is what they know. This is their comfort
Yeah,
zone, as uncomfortable as it might appear. Can you imagine if what we were talking about earlier, how sometimes people use, let's say, certain things that happened to them in childhood, or this is what they know. And I know for human beings, in different things, it doesn't even have to be monumental. We kind of are resistant to change or moving
yeah,
forward, like you said.
yeah.
So
And
when
it's
you,
so sad because, especially when a person has suffered in that way and
yes,
suffered a consistent pattern of abuse, over many years. Hey, after a while, you get so beat down that you become zombie-like, and then you take it in stride, and then you have the mindset that you expect it to happen because then that becomes
right,
normal.
yes, yes,
How sad is that?
yes, and I know the what happens, Bill, once you go ahead and you work with either an individual or a family, because I can't see where, even if there's, let's say, a target person, let's say in the family, you know, do you ever have where if that's the target person, all of a sudden it will start trying to pick on another family member just to like basically
Absolutely.
throw the family into an uproar, like what's
Yeah.
happening now?
And that is the mission of the devil and his minions anyway, to kill, rob, and destroy. So it'll start out with, working on a person who may be in a weakened emotional state. And
Hmm.
so then the attack begins. And so it's bully tactics. The devil uses bully tactics, and then it's divide and conquer. So, once the initial wave comes of these supernatural occurrences, which creates fear and confusion in the person, then the attack starts to isolate that person and
Okay.
to really start an all-out attack on the mind and to get the person in this chaotic situation to where now, the person is having problems with the family members or no communication or just
Right.
staying in a bedroom or, and then I call it a spiritual virus because then that starts to carry throughout the family
Yes.
and then the whole family's in an uproar and everybody's standing there with their hands up saying, what happened here? How did it go so
Right.
wrong so fast? And that's what the devil does. He's very covert and these little subtle things, take place in the beginning and then all of a sudden, it turns into something very, very major and very serious.
And let me ask you, Bill, I'm sure, I imagine you have you ever come across a person that at some point voluntarily allowed or invited in a demon, and then later on they're sorry, but it wasn't like a takeover, I guess is my point,
Hmm.
where at one point they did it voluntarily, and now they're in a situation where, of course, their life is possibly horrible, their families. Do you handle that differently from somebody that was maybe victimized and then it took off from there?
Yeah, I could think of many of those cases right off the top of my head. And one of my early cases involved a young man in Delaware that was actually had become demonically possessed. He was sexually abused as a child
Hmm.
repeatedly and was very angry. He felt that God had betrayed him and left him and abandoned him. And so that caused him to go into Satanism. And he was in this satanic cult, and he had the daggers. He had just the things that, I mean, he had the whole works as far as seeing, if you were to see someone who was heavily involved into Satanism and making sacrifices and things of that
Wow.
nature, he had all of that. And so the deeper he got involved and he was making sacrifices of animals and things of that nature, the more taken over he had become
Wow.
to the point where he started attacking family members. And when a person's under demonic possession, they don't remember anything. It's like their mind is unplugged and this
Hmm.
external force is plugged in. And so this young man, that was quite a battle. I'll never forget it. And again, this was among my first cases, many years ago. And God worked through me to free him. But it was a titanic struggle, that's for sure.
Because yeah, I imagine that at some point, um, yeah, I totally I see where you were coming from. That he was thinking, why didn't God rescue me when these horrible things
Yeah,
were happening to me? And as
hmm
a child, sometimes it's very basic, and you hold on to that anger, especially if you didn't have an adult, or the adults that were
Yeah,
supposed to keep you safe were the ones that were victimizing you. So yeah,
exactly.
and
And
it's
so there was a lot of anger and rage, associated with that, and yet, where he thought he was going to find a partnership with the devil per se,
hmm
that really greatly backfired on him to where he was now in a position of, had I not gotten there when I did,
hmm
a tragedy probably would have occurred. And so, I praise God that that wasn't the case. And as this was going back and forth, he did not want to renounce Satan and what he was doing. So this was part of the titanic struggle back and forth until the power of God, wore the devil and his minions down to the point, and him as well, to where he finally said that he did want to come back to God and accept Jesus Christ as his Savior. And so then, once that took place, you could literally feel this letting go. And it I know it sounds crazy, but you'd have to see it to believe it. These demonic forces let people go, and they just slump. And once
right.
that happens, and they start to cry, and then it's over with. And so after it was all over, I went around with him in his room and other places, and we collected all of the satanic paraphernalia, all the daggers and all the things that he was, that he had there,
hmm
and we got rid of all of it.
And so, in other words, what you're relating is that even for somebody who has voluntarily, uh, basically integrated being possessed, because that's ultimately what it is.
hmm
You can still turn back from that. In other words, it doesn't mean like, okay, well,
Yes.
you brought that on by yourself, so too bad.
And
you
even
know,
if a person literally sells their soul, and I have been in those situations as well, um, they could still be delivered and redeemed from that as well, because the devil is a counterfeit. He is a liar, and he's offering this so-called contract for your soul, but God doesn't hold any validity to that. And so these people who have, and again, God's worked through me to help many of these types of people as well, that literally have sold their souls. They were redeemed, and they were saved, and they were delivered, and then they went on to lead very good and productive lives because they were free from it. So it's never too late. The only time that it becomes too late is if a person just does not want to stop doing great wickedness. And there are people out there like that,
oh
and they're part of
yes,
the satanic seed line. And those
yes,
types of people are incorrigible.
yes,
They enjoy doing what they're doing. They enjoy creating miseries for others.
hmm
That is their life's mission.
yes,
And so they're not going to change. And furthermore, they're going to just continue to create miseries for as many people as they possibly can, because those
yes,
demons are working through them to do so.
yes, and I've spoken. These are what because when people say the word sadist, you always think of like serial killer sadists, which those are very bad. But I tell people
hmm
there are people that are sadists. They don't go around killing anybody, but they get great pleasure out of what you just described: controlling,
Yeah,
seeing people unhappy, bullying them, threatening them, all those things. They're sadists. If they can make you fear, and there's
yes.
a lot of them running around. Sometimes,
It's a source of fulfillment to them and great
yes,
power to them, and
yes,
it's all a lie. I mean, they're under this delusion that that they have this power. They don't have anything, and
right,
their day is going to come. A great, terrible day is going to come. Now, look, we're all going to stand accountable for the things that we've done,
hmm
and I am by no means a saint. I don't claim to be, but
right,
I try to do the best that I can do, and I try to be the best that I can be each and every day of my life. We're all going to stand accountable and give an account of what we have done on this earth. But those types of people, woe to them, because a
right,
great, terrible day is coming, and a purging is coming, and whoa, I would not want to be them for 1 second.
right. And a lot of times, us as human beings, when somebody does something bad to us, whether it's a parent, a boss, sometimes friends that betray us, we all want that moment of justice. Like, I want to see you get it. But
hmm
sometimes that moment comes and goes, or you might even see that person move on like unpunished, I guess is my point. But from what you're
hmm
describing, sooner or later,
Yes.
um, that does catch up to them at some point or other, even if you're not there
No
to witness
question
it.
about it. No question about it. And, even people like that do wrong to you, and this is why Jesus, and I write about this in my new book called The Connection. Jesus, one of his strongest messages was about forgiveness. And the reason for forgiveness is it's every bit as much for us as it is for the person that we're forgiving. And it doesn't mean that, and it's easier said than done. Believe me, I know this from personal experience. It's easier said than done. However, Jesus wanted us to forgive because when we hold on to that kind of hatred and anger, that person has power over us, and it becomes a spiritual poisoning to us. So
Yes.
that was a large part of his message that, forgive and you'll be forgiven. And doesn't mean you have to go, and be back in the circle with that person or, act phony and be buddy-buddy or whatever it is. But you've forgiven them, and then you just release them and let them go their way, and that's it.
And you know what? It's really funny because in the last couple of weeks, there's a route that I take to go see one of my sons, and there's a church, and you know how they have those boards where they'll put up different sayings, and the last one they have, it says, "Forgive your enemies. It'll really mess with their heads." And every time I see it,
it's true.
I have to laugh.
It's true.
Because to me,
someone like me, I like to be in control of myself, of my thoughts. I don't want somebody, dominating my thoughts or my actions because I'm holding a hatred towards them or whatever it may be. And I've been through all that. Believe me, I hated my dad for many, many years. And next time I come back, we'll have to get into that part. I'll share that with you. But thank God I was able to forgive him before his untimely death. But I understand what that's all about and how just a burning hatred can really get, and the devil loves it. When we get into that type of area where we have these just searing, burning hatreds for someone, the devil's loving every second of it. So, again, for anyone out there that would like to get a copy of my books, Dark Force, or I've written 4 books, and so Dark Force delivers the second one. 10 Steps is a free audio book now. I wanted to do something for people. And still the same thing with this book. I can't tell you how many times and how many shows I've been on that I've said that if you can't afford to buy my book or books, just send me an email. I'll send you a free PDF copy because it's important that people read this information because it's true, and B, this is preparation. This is how you can prepare in real warfare and real battle, and each and every one of us are in spiritual warfare on a daily basis. Most people don't realize that, but we truly are. So I'm thankful to God that he blessed me with a little window to be able to have written The Connection, which I had written it in under 3 weeks, and that little window took place between mid-January and mid-February, and God really put it on me that he wanted me to write this book, and I sat down. I obeyed the what I felt was an urging from God to do this. And, I mean, there were days. Now, usually when I write, I'll spend like 2 to 4 hours a day, each and every day until the project's over. But on this one, I spent some days that were 16 hours a day sitting in front of that screen to where my eyes felt like they were swelling up. They hurt so bad, I could hardly see anymore. But it was that urgent to get the work done, to get the book done, and to get it out there. And I'm thankful to God because all of the reviews have been, just fantastic. And I thank everybody out there who has read the book and others who will get it. I truly appreciate it. And it's great to be able to sell books. But look, this is important information. So, again, if there's people out there who can't afford it, then just send me an email and I'll send you a free PDF copy.
And you know what? When you come back, Bill, which I'm hoping to have, one of the things I would love to talk to you about on another show would be what you described as far as family history or lineage affecting present day, whether it was a vow taken voluntarily or that. In other words, that it affects the bloodline, not just the person who originally
You're exactly right.
did whatever.
And this is why in my deliverances, I will mention that by the mighty power of Yahweh and his mighty and holy name in Jesus' name, I bind and rebuke all family bloodline curses. And so it's very important to, be thorough and mention all of these things because you're exactly right that that bloodline curse can be devastating.
Right. And in your case, you mentioned you found things, but there's people that don't have family members to them, or if they were ever in an adoption where they don't have
Hmm.
any way to go back into their family history to find out. But I would love to talk to you. But anyway, Bill, thank you so very, very much for.
It was
It has
it
been
was my
wonderful. It's
pleasure
been
to be
great.
on. Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be on with you. I look forward to the next time. We'll set a date
Absolutely.
up soon here. And I'm actually going to go rest a little
I
bit.
know.
And
I
thank you to
know.
everybody out there. And God bless you, Marlene, and God bless everybody out there. And look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Take care, Bill.
God bless you.
Likewise. God bless you. Bye bye. Okay, guys. Oh, are you guys excited? I know I'm excited. Let me tell you. I I know I say this about a lot of people, but I could have talked to him a lot more. But you know what? He was so sweet about taking this time out to do this interview because it's true. We had already rescheduled it once. I ran behind another show earlier today. It was like, I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm going to miss out on this again. And you know what? He does. He is busy. And I imagine maybe there's times where over the phone is not going to do it. You know, he has to go in person. I and I know anybody who's flown not that I fly that much, but let me tell you something. If you're talking changes in time zone and just the flying, and since most modern planes are so spacious, uh, by the time you get off the flight, it's true. What you want to do is you want to lie down and just rest and wiggle your toes and watch TV and veg out. Um, Besides the fact that you're doing battle with the devil, I mean, what? But anyway, I think with more time, I would love to. If I know Bill would not break confidentiality, but to listen to some of the stories of some of the cases that he's had. Also, what we were talking about, um, family lineage, vows taken by some of your ancestors, whether they did it knowingly or whether they did it unknowingly, whether they were aware that they were not make that they were making the vow not only for themselves but for their bloodline, as in their children and their children's children. Okay, without, especially if these people are long dead, there's no way to ever find out. But I have spoken to different people about this subject, and you know, nobody leaves perfect lives, but sometimes you will see a family that they're very tragic and really horrific things happen almost to every generation that you go, wow. Or they suffer from problems with addiction or very dysfunctional stuff, and they kind of try to hold on to each other, but you could tell one generation after the other there's something, and you think, you could point the finger and say, well, it's the addiction that's causing all these problems, maybe with the parenting or the kids, or domestic violence, or like he said, absolutely. And guys, I've talked about this before, where childhood abuse and trauma will open you up with an attachment, but that's something else. But getting back to the thing about um, the family lineage, and sometimes on the face of it, it looks very obvious that the dysfunction or what's going on, whatever it is what's causing the problems. But if you could take like a bird's eye view of, let's say, a timeline of this family, and you're thinking, wow, that man, things are always not good for these people. I mean, their lives are just either bad or worse. And a lot of times, you know, when you go back, you find out that at some point there was something along those lines that happened. Okay? Um, let's say, for example, and sometimes what he described about this young man who had been sexually abused and who was very angry with God because God did not rescue him. Without knowing the specifics, maybe the person that was victimizing him or abusing him was maybe a parent or a caretaker, somebody that should have been the one to protect him. That's a very deep level of anger, especially if this was systematic abuse, which means it wasn't a one-time thing. Sometimes children endure abuse for years. You want to talk about deep-seated rage, deep-seated hatred, deep-seated revolt against God? Because who else is this? My parent is the one that's doing this to me, or the person. Who else is left from me that was, like, in other words, short of a divine intervention, I'm not going to get saved, and you didn't come through for me. But let's use the example Bill gave. This kid, of course, rage, hatred, gets into Satanism. Let's say he would never have crossed paths with Bill for whatever reason. His family never called him in, whatever. And he just went along his merry way of destruction. He gets together with somebody, kind of a family, maybe has a child, hopefully doesn't sacrifice him or give him up. But if you don't think that stain of evil, and I know I'm being very dramatic here, but that's the other way, doesn't affect, let's say, not only who he has children with, but children that he has with that person. And let's say, for example, let's say he gets together with somebody, a girl. She gets pregnant. They part ways, maybe when she's pregnant or shortly thereafter. He's never really in the child's life. Regardless, that child is going to suffer from the vows or the commitment or what he was into, that animal sacrifice and all of that. All of that. In other words, they don't even have to be in proximity as far as upbringing. Okay? And then you know, that's when somebody like Bill Bean comes in, and that's what I like. It's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to verify this. But knowing what I know, based on my experience, I'm going to address it, as in revoking any vows made by somebody in the past from that family. Whether they did it on purpose or they didn't do it on purpose, he just addresses it because he knows there's a good chance that is lurking somewhere in the background. And it's, the way I look at it is, yes, we all have free will, regardless of our history, family history, whatever. We all have our free will. We all have the free will to say, this is what I want my story to be. However, when you have that in your background, whether it's trauma in your lifetime as a child or later on, or especially when you have that family lineage on a metaphysical plane, if you want to look at it. And what I mean a metaphysical plane is, this person, you've never, that maybe that person that did it, like, died maybe 50, 60, 100 years ago, but their ill effects is you. It's the whisper in the ear. You know, when you're going to do something, maybe it's a split second to do something stupid or wrong or dangerous or suicidal. That is the whisper in the ear that puts you over the edge to do something that later on snowballs into horrible results. Whether it's death, imprisonment, addiction, domestic violence, violence against your family members, you being the victimizer and instead of being the one being victimized, which, by the way, that is that does very appropriate. Many times victimizers were victimized. Okay, that lineage, that thing is that whisper, that, and here we go. Let it snowball into other generations. Let it cause havoc and unhappiness and misery with anybody in the orbit of that person. By this, I mean, it doesn't even, if you think it's just family contained, if, co-workers, friends, neighbors, the more misery, better it is. But when we're talking about family lineage, yes, that's sometimes how it works. It's that split second when you're going to make a decision. And you might even have that part of you that's saying, don't do that, or don't say that, or don't go there. What I call the higher self, the part of you which recognizes that what you're going to do is being pushed forward by somebody that's not you. Okay? Somebody that, um, and I know this is very, that prototypical that you've got the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. And that's your conscience. And, I tell everybody, feeling tempted to do something wrong, that comes with being a human being. Okay? It's what you do. Temptation is like, okay, so you're tempted, you make a decision. I'm talking about here about doing stuff that's like totally self-destructive in one way or the other. And some people, I've spoken, and I'm sure you've, that people that do things that from, and they're like, part of them is, the later on I goes, I didn't want to do that. I don't know why I did it. I didn't want to do that. But it was like, well, that's part of what plays into those split second decisions that sometimes makes a difference in your life. Either devastates it totally, devastates those that are your family members, versus saying, you know what, I'm going to step back from this. Maybe all you need is a little push. There you go. Yes, you all make mistakes. Some mistakes are really, they're just mistakes. That's the human condition. But when you're talking about somebody who mistakes are monumental or dangerous, yeah, that's usually the way it works out. Well, anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. I know I love speaking to Bill, um, because he comes from a place of, and we were talking about this before we started to record. I said, you know what? I really wish we could talk about that. A lot of people have seen the show that details what happened to you when you were a child and all the paranormal occurrences that occurred in your home and, you know, what you witnessed as a child. And I said, you know what? A lot of people, after having survived that, there's another word for it, survived that, would have nothing whatsoever to do with the supernatural, the paranormal, much less demons, the devil, Satanism. It's like, forget it. You know, I don't want anything. And he didn't. He confronted it. Okay, he confronted it head on. And I think that that's very admirable, because also we said, despite having what he later found out was a family history, despite having endured the loss of his mom at a very crucial age, which is devastating for any child, what happened with his dad, all these things, guess what? Look where he's at now. And but my point being, and we also talked about this, where a lot of people use circumstances like what happened to him, not necessarily have to be paranormal, supernatural, but some really heavy duty dysfunction in their family that kind of in a way wrecks their childhood or their adolescence, as this is the excuse that they always give for, like, you know, uh, uh, what would you expect from me? You know, my childhood was crummy, so I'm not going to aspire to any better. What? No. Uh. It's like your story can be whatever it is. And here's your proof right there. Bill Bean. So anyway, guys, again, thank you so much for spending this time with me. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, my true believers. Tell me about your true stories, Facebook, and on Twitter and Instagram. I post not only about new shows, live stream, I give you heads up about upcoming shows and things that we're doing. Also, I've got, just like Bill Bean, I've got a lot of super interesting guests that I know you guys are going to love to hear the interview with them. So again, guys, thank you very much for being part of my audience. Take care.